We're officially starting. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October 14, 2022 California Board of Behavioral Sciences Policy Advocacy Committee meeting. My name is Max Disposti, pronounced he, him, and I'm the chairperson of the committee today. Before we convene, I would like to remind everyone that is present that the board is a consumer protection agency that is charged with administering and enforcing the board's laws. Where protections of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. The Board of Behavioral Sciences will be holding this public meeting in person and via WebEx platform. I believe someone is in person in Sacramento, correct, Steve? Yes. Board member will be participating in person and remotely. I will announce when we are accepting public comments on the various issues. And for each public comments period, we will first be accepting the comments from the people that are in the room, in the audience, if there are any. And then the moderator will open the lines.
Actually, Max, I apologize. I should have redone the script there, but there isn't it's all virtual today. I apologize
it's fine.
for that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if one of us was there in Sacramento. So it's good to know. So we will have just all virtual connections today. So, but the moderator will manage our conversation in terms of when it's appropriate for the audience members to comment. Each commentator will have 2 minutes for each item. Moderator, good morning to you. Would you please provide the audience instruction on how they might participate during the meeting and at the appropriate times? And thank you.
Thank you. This is the moderator. And just a friendly reminder, if you can please mute your microphones when you're not speaking to avoid any audio distortion. And we will go over the instructions for public comment. So in a moment, we will display the instructions for public comment. Thank you. And each time the committee requests for public comment, they'll ask the moderator, myself, to open the Q&A feature in WebEx. And I will open it up. You'll see the instructions come up each time, and I will give verbal instructions as well, letting you know that you can click on that question mark inside of a square, which is typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And then in the text field that appears, type in comment, or I would like to make a comment, and make sure that it is going to all panelists before you hit the button send. And afterwards, I will send a request to unmute your microphone, and you just accept it by clicking the unmute me button. So those are the instructions for participating. Let me see, has anyone called in? No call in. If you called in, you can raise your hand by pressing *3. But those are the instructions. I pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. And now, due to the roll call, please introduce yourself. I will have Christina doing the roll call, and for those of you introducing yourself, let the public know whether you're a public or licensed member of this board. Christina, can you please call the roll call? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Disposti.
Here, and public member and board chair. Thank you.
Abigail Ortega.
Here, licensed member.
John Sovek.
Present, LMFT member.
Wendy Strack.
Here and public member.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christina. Good morning to you again. And also, the first item in the agenda actually are introductions to make sure that the members of the public know who is in the room with us, which is agenda number 2, item number 2. And this is the time where the staff and public participants can introduce themselves. Introduction are voluntary for members of the public, but we can start with the staff. Please introduce yourself, and maybe Christina, you can go around and make sure that you call out our staff. That would be great.
Okay, Steve Sodergren.
Hi, Steve Sodergren, Executive Officer of the Board of Behavioral Sciences. Good morning.
Roseanne Helms.
Roseanne Helms, Legislative Manager for the board.
Christy Berger.
Good morning, Christy Berger, Regulatory Analyst for the board.
Marlene McManus.
Marlon McManus, Assistant Executive Officer for the Board of Behavioral Sciences.
And Sabina Knight.
Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the board. Good morning.
And I'm Christina Kimura, Administrative Analyst for the board.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christina. I think that will cover for our staff. And I would like to ask the moderator to open it to see if there are any members of the public that would like to introduce themselves. Again, this is not, you don't have to unless you want to notice your presence, and we're here to receive it. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. This is the moderator. We've opened up the Q&A, or you can also raise your hand by hovering over the cursor or mouse over your name and pressing on the hand outline. Or if you would like to, in the Q&A, you can type in comments, and the instructions are on the screen, and we can call on you as well if you would like to participate in the introductions. I see a hand up. I will unmute or request to unmute Kathy Atkins' microphone.
Morning, everyone. This is Kathy Atkins with the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. Thanks for having us all.
Thank you. There are no, actually, we do have a few other hands. Give me just a moment. We have Rebecca Gonzalez. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
The National Association of Social Workers, California chapter.
Thank you. I am going to send a request to unmute Ben Caldwell's microphone.
Hey everyone, Ben Caldwell, MFT. Good to be with you.
Thank you. I have Carmen. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
Sorry, moderator, I couldn't hear. Did you pass it back to me?
No, sorry. I sent a request to unmute Carmen's microphone. Okay. Carmen, you are unmuted. If you are speaking, Carmen, we can't hear you. A quick trick is clicking on the down-facing arrow on your mute button and selecting another microphone from the options that you have listed there. Okay, so you used the Q&A to introduce yourself. You said, "Good morning, this is Carmen Spears, a New California LPCC. I can't get it to work this morning. Thank you." And last request, last hand up here is from Melissa. I'm going to submit a request to unmute your microphone, Melissa.
On with the Society for Social Work Leadership in Healthcare and University of the Pacific. So 2 separate things. Thank you.
No further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, moderator, thank you so much. And thank you for those of you that are participating this morning. We really, really appreciate the public participation. Okay, I believe, excuse me, I believe we can move now to our agenda item number 3, which is our consent calendar. As before we go for the approval, we will be tabling the approval of the July 29, 2022 meeting minutes until the next committee meeting. So I believe in our consent calendar, the rest stays included. So I believe we have to call for a vote. Before call for a vote, I'm sorry if there are any comments. Yes, Wendy.
Mr. Chair, I just noticed there's an echo right now, but there's a typo in item 10 with the motions. It says Disposti moved and Strack moved. So I think the Strack is a second on that one.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Wendy. Definitely, we can include those changes because they are not, substantial. They are typos, so definitely we can do that before the vote. Are there any comments in regards to the consent calendar from the board members?
Could you give me the page and line number, please?
Oh, sure. It's, let's see, what page is this? Page 8, line number 29.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Wendy.
Sure.
Are there any other comments from the committee members? Anyone would like to move the approval of the consent calendar?
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Wendy. We need a second. I can second.
You were the only one there, so you may need to.
That's very true. Now I realize. So we have a vote. We have a motion on the floor. I believe we need to open to the public if there are any comments about the vote for our consent calendar. Moderator, if you can please open thing. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. Members of the public, if you would like to participate in this agenda item, click on the question mark inside of the square, type comments, send it to all panelists.
Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. And so far, I see no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, wonderful. We're back to the board with a motion moved by Wendy Strack, approved by myself, seconded by myself. Okay, it's Friday and the coffee is kicking in. Christina, if you can please call the vote. Thank you so much.
And before I call the vote, I just wanted to inform the committee that per Sabina's instructions in the past, even if you were not at the meeting, you may still vote on the approval of these minutes. And with that, I'll call the vote. Max Disposti?
Yes.
Abigail Ortega?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there.
John Sobek?
Abstain.
And Wendy Strack?
Yes.
Okay, and I believe motion passes with 2 abstentions. Is that correct, Sabina?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you so much. Okay, we're moving now agenda number 4 of our agenda item number 4, and it's discussion and possible recommendation regarding the draft statutory language for a temporary practice allowance. I know that Roseanne is introducing this, correct? Hi, Roseanne.
Hi, Max. Thanks. So this discussion is one that's we're continuing back from July's Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting. We had discussed the temporary practice allowance proposal. So currently the board's licensing laws require a therapist to hold a valid and current California license or registration if they're engaging in therapy via telehealth with a client who is physically located in California. There's currently no exceptions to this. There's been a lot of feedback, and we've taken a look at what other states do. And some states, a lot of states have a similar requirement. Some other states allow for flexibility so that clients who are traveling or who might be transitioning to a new therapist in California because they've just moved here, and so they're kind of in that in between therapists, they might obtain, other states have exceptions so that these clients can obtain temporary services for continuity of care purposes from an out-of-state licensee. So what we did is we took a look at a lot of these other states that had these exceptions. We took a look at their law to see what it looked like. So attachment B is a comparison chart that compares some of the temporary practice allowances of other states. And then attachment C through J show the text of the law for those particular jurisdictions. So what we did is we took a look at all of the features of the different temporary practices allowances of other states and tried to figure out what might work best for California to formulate a proposal. So the draft language is shown in attachment A. And some features to note regarding the proposal that's in attachment A that's for consideration today. It only permits one temporary practice allowance per year. If a second temporary practice allowance is needed, staff would suggest that a person needs to utilize the license portability pathway to licensure. And that's where if somebody's been licensed for 2 years in another state at the highest level of practice, they need to take some CE and pass our California law and ethics exam, and then they have a streamlined pathway to get a license. Another feature here, the applicant for the temporary practice would self-attest to meeting the qualifications online. They would provide, under this proposal, they would provide the date that they're going to begin the temporary practice, and then the Breeze system would generate a receipt which would contain the expiration date of the temporary practice allowance. The current proposal, we only decided to start with the temporary practice allowance for out-of-state licensees only, not registrants. So registrants are not included in this proposal. And the proposal only addresses temporary practice for individuals with an equivalent license in another state at the highest level for independent clinical practice. It doesn't address other types of mental health professionals that the board does not have jurisdiction over here in California. So we had discussed this item back in our June. The telehealth committee had discussed this item in June, and then the policy and advocacy committee had discussed this in its last July meeting, and there was a couple of main concerns that were expressed during that time. There are concerns that the way the proposal is drafted, having out-of-state licensees self-attest could lead to some abuse by potentially out-of-state practitioners. And the second concern was that telehealth platforms could potentially exploit the system. So we went back and took a look at the language and tried to add a couple of more safeguards in there to see if that would help the proposal be a little bit more acceptable. So what we suggest is a couple of different things. We have added a sunset date to the proposal so the board can determine how it's working. We put in a sunset date of January 1, 2026, but if the committee and the board decide to move forward with this proposal, I might suggest putting it one more year out. It's timed to our sunset bill that's going to be happening in 2026, but really if this were to become effective as law, it would only really give a year's worth of information to know how it's working. I don't know if that's enough or not. So that's one thought. We also added a requirement that the out-of-state licensee provide the board with their social security number or individual taxpayer identification number, and also the current government issued photo ID upon application. Providing that information would allow the board staff to more easily track whether someone is abusing the system by requesting multiple practice allowances per year, because the social security or the individual taxpayer ID number is a unique number for each person. So they couldn't just go in under another name, for example. And then also if this proposal was to be accepted, and run as a bill, I would suggest that as part of the fiscal impact for the bill, we consider asking for one full-time office technician position to have a person monitoring all applicants requesting these allowances, contact any suspicious entries for more information, and send any issues to enforcement. And the office technician could also be available to answer licensee questions specific to the out-of-state practice allowance and people who are trying to utilize the temporary practice allowance. If the committee still has concerns about the safeguard, about the language after the safeguards, I would also consider a discussion, maybe possibly reducing the temporary practice allowance. Right now it's proposing 60 consecutive calendar days per calendar year. Some other states have a 30 consecutive days calendar year or other things like that. So that could be discussed as well if there's still concerns. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. Roseanne, just for my clarification, what a motion in support of this will look like, just to have an idea about the language. Do you mind?
Yeah, sure.
If we are in agreement, of course. I don't mean to.
If we're in agreement and the committee wants to move forward, a motion would be to direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes, and to bring the bill to the November board meeting for consideration as a legislative proposal.
I would actually like to make the motion and open the conversation, the discussion around this item right away. So definitely, thank you, Roseanne, for that. So we have a motion on the floor, as you all heard, that I moved. Are there any discussions, questions, commentary from our board member before we move to the audience?
Do you have a second?
Not yet. So yeah, we can have a second.
So I have something that might be a substantive change. So I want to ask this question before we go ahead. Roseanne, California Board of Psychology does have the 30-day you've had in your research. I actually would lean towards just making the proposal be with the 30-day following their lead, because then that creates a little bit of consistency across psychological services in the state. So I would want it to be on the 30. Is that a substantive and we need to put that in before we motion?
Yeah, that would be something that we would need to decide today to put in to the motion, and that's fine. We could amend the motion for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I would like the second. Do I add that amendment now or?
Max would have to amend his motion.
Right. I will need to agree. Yeah, I will need to agree to that, which I do actually. So I think it's very important. So definitely I can implement that. So we will have a motion and a second with that editing. But then we can go to the public and see if there are any other comments or concerns so that we can continue the conversation, of course. Yes, John.
Well, hey, Roseanne, I want to thank you for taking this back because I was one of the person with a lot of concerns last time. Yeah. I think what you all have done, the languaging you found really addresses those concerns, and I'm definitely in support of bringing this to the full board to have a bigger discussion on. So thank you for doing all that. I know it was a pain. I know I was a pain last time, but it was really important to me.
Right. That's how good work gets done. So no, it's good that you voiced your concerns. So that's much appreciated.
Exactly. I see Abigail. I see your hand raised, or maybe it's an old one.
No, it's a new one.
Yeah. Thank you.
So just we're asking for a lot of personal information to identify the person and track, and then electronic mailing address. Are you guys referring to a virtual mailing address? I'm not or is that just email address?
It would just be an email address.
Oh, okay.
If they have one. If they don't, that's what, yeah. If they have an email address, then we ask that it be provided. If they don't, then they can just say, I don't have one. And they wouldn't have to make one. That's why we have that kind of weird language in there that says if they have an email address, because not everybody does.
Oh, okay. Got it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. John again.
Thank you for that question because it brought up something in my brain that I've been thinking about and I forgot. Steve, how would these people be listed in Breeze? Would they actually be there as would it show up in Breeze if you search their license, if I was in California, or would they be completely outside the Breeze system?
I think initially my plan or my thought would be they would not be within the Breeze system or outward facing. It would be a record keeping for us on the back end so that we can communicate with them or look at make sure. So yeah, it wouldn't be out there.
So for liability reasons, if the consumer wanted to request information about the waiver or stuff like that, they would have to contact the board directly, perhaps this technician who's monitoring it, or how would that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the OT, the position would be to work with the public or anybody about any questions concerning that. And so, yeah, so it would just really be an end facing for administrative purposes.
Smart set in creating the regulation to include a requirement that states how you can contact the local board in case there are any questions or concerns about this 30-day or the process, so that the consumer who's working with this out-of-state person, if there's some liability things come up, there's something that happens that's not, isn't working well for them, they know who to reach out to. Just like we have the thing in every therapist office, you know, that plaque we have up if we have complaints. Is there a version of that that should go with this as well?
It's a good question.
I think I can address that. So the person, they already have to be a pre-existing client of the licensee. So they already have a relationship with the therapist, and the bill requires that they tell them that they're not licensed in California and that they're in California now. So I think that having that conversation, nobody really goes in their language as far as saying, and here's all the information for the California board. I think that could be confusing. But they are required to inform that, hey, this is just for a temporary amount of time. I'm not licensed in California. This is a temporary practice, you know, because you're transitioning to being in another state or you're on vacation.
So example might be if I was an Oregon therapist, went through this system, got a 30-day waiver, then if that client had a complaint against me, they would need to contact my Oregon board.
They could contact either the Oregon board or the California board.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm leaning towards some type of language. If you have concerns or complaints, you know, contact this particular technician, or not the person, but the actual like email it would go to that covers that. Because as a therapist right now, I'm required to have in my office that statement that says if you have any complaints, and that's in my office policy intakes as well too. So I think we would be really smart for anyone who is doing a 30-day waiver experience to have that same language addressed to them as part of the process.
Okay, so maybe we did something, let me look here.
Steve, you know the language I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I think it's kind of, I understand what you're saying. So it's, you know, that they have to apply to the board or have to submit all this information to the board, and at the same time must notify the client that they're working with of, we can probably pattern something off that. Yeah, the other language. I know what you're talking about.
Is the standard language that we
yeah.
I think we could put something like, if you look at the language, page 5, where it says the person informs the client of the limited time frame of the services, that they are not licensed in California, and provides the California board's contact information, something like that.
I like that. I think that sounds right.
And provides the California board's contact information. And then that way they would provide a phone number. Maybe we just be more specific and say full phone number, direct phone number, or something like that.
Yeah, because on our required language, I think there is a phone number and an email. Steve, I'm trying to remember. I'm not in the office, so I can't look.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a phone number. I think we tend to stay away from, because phone numbers change and emails change. So to get that into the
say contact information.
And I think that's what we might put in. We might actually have the web address in that original language. I think I have to look.
Maybe that's what it is. I think there is a directive way for a client who has a concern to, this is where you go to. I'm almost positive you have, maybe it is a web address.
Roseanne, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. So I would say that yes, Steve and I can look for that and figure out exactly what the wording of the language should be. And then if this goes to board, then we can present that language at that board. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
And just to clarify, it is our phone number. We might want to look at that because I know we've had some changes. So yes, but it is a phone number. I would prefer doing a web address, the web address, since that's going to stay pretty static, just for just throwing that out there.
Okay. So I think the motion on the floor stands, right, with the modification that John added to it. So we have a motion and a second from John Sobek. I think, are there any other comments from our board members? And otherwise, we will ask the moderator to open and to our audience to see if there are any other feedbacks or comments and suggestions.
Max, before you do that, I have one more question for the board members. For the sunset date, January 1, 2026. So if this were to run as a bill proposal, it would run in January 2023. It would become effective January 1, 2024 if it was successful. So it would have about a year of data before we had to consider making a decision. Basically, we'd have a year to consider if we wanted to extend it or not, because a year before 2026, a bill would have to run. So there's like a 1 year window. Do we feel that that's enough time to gather data and information about how it's working, or is there a feeling that maybe a 2 year to 2027 would be better? The reason that I put in 2026 is because my thought was it could be cleaned up in our sunset bill if it wanted to be extended or deleted or make adjustments, whatever, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Roseanne, can the extension be decided even a little bit later on, or has to be part of the proposal once if it's approved and so forth?
It doesn't have to be part of the discussion today, but I would recommend having that discussion at the board meeting if not today, before this is approved to run.
I mean, I know in the past we usually like to see the 2 years because it's a time frame that will allow us to have more reliable data, right?
Right.
Usually that's the 10. It's not the rule by any means, but I noticed that we usually tend to do that.
Yeah.
Because a year of data sometimes is not sufficient especially now we came out of COVID, we had different kind of data coming to us that they are not the norm or just a response of our, pandemic. So I don't know. I will be tempted to say that 2 years will be a best way to approach this, but again, I leave it open to my fellow board members and to the conversation. So definitely thank you, Roseanne. As we go out for our members of the public, please feel free to chime into that as well. John?
Steve, you're the one who's best going to be able to answer this question about data collection. Do you think a year we don't know how active this is going to even be.
Yeah.
Do you think a year will give you enough? Because if we can roll it into the larger bill, it's probably going to be easier to continue the process versus having to go back in 2 years and do it as a continuation. So I'm just curious, what's your thought? I mean, you're the one gathering data.
I mean, honestly, when I look at this, putting this in place, I think it's a necessity, having to work with people, trying to help clients do that transition over to California. So I'm not sure, for me personally, the data, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how many people actually apply for this, as in for using it to make a decision. I mean, I think it's something that should continue. So whether people are using it or not, I'm not sure. I'm not really interested in the data per se. I mean, so I think I would prefer probably to actually have it kind of wrapped in nicely with the sunset. I mean, honestly. And then we can revisit it. I mean, if for some reason, I think what I can see myself reporting is just how many people are utilizing it. I mean, it's not something that I would want to discontinue either way, personally, because I think it is needed. So that's my 2 cents. So I would prefer the sunset type of kind of wrapping it into that, making it nice and kind of, we can tackle all that at once. So.
And if that way, I mean, if anything comes up right away that needs to be fine-tuned, then we can fine-tune it right away in sunset. So maybe that is a good option.
Okay, I would really like to go and see if there are any comments from the public at this moment. Moderator, if you can please open and see if there are any comments.
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of the square, type comment, and send it to all panelists. And I do have a few coming in. Give me just a moment. I have a comment from Carmen, who wasn't able to unmute mic earlier today. So is it okay if I read that out?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
What about testing it out with a small sample? Hold on, sorry, let me expand my screen here so I can read the message. What about testing it out with a small sample? For example, open it up for 60 days, then close it. This way you can test it out with a smaller number of therapists before opening it up to all therapists. Just a suggestion. I do have a request to speak from Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. Give me just a moment.
Hi, this is Kathy Atkins from CAMP. Thanks for bringing this issue to the committee and the board. I didn't have comment as much as just question, and I had to step out for a second, and so I hope this wasn't covered while I stepped out. My apologies if it was. I was just curious why not the pre-licensees from other states. My second was I was curious about the continuous versus totality of hours, and then just the Board of Psychology. I don't know how long they've had this in place. I apologize if you said it in, I didn't pick up on that. I was just curious how it was working there. So these aren't opinions, comments, or recommendations. I just wanted to make sure the BBS or the board sort of did an assessment of those three issues. I think what I've definitely heard everyone talking about, I agree, is this sort of as a try it out and see what works or doesn't work. You know, obviously there's no perfect solution or workability. So I just thank the committee and the board for looking into this. As you know, California assesses this, as well as having people come in, and California is often the first state to implement things. So thank you for, you know, trying to be towards the front. And again, no comments. Thank you for bringing this up. No comments per se, just more questions that I just wanted to make sure the board or the committee had assessed. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you. If you are okay with that, perhaps once we collect the rest of the remaining comments, we might have Roseanne answering directly to you, if it's okay with you, Roseanne, so that we don't interrupt the flow at the moment. So thank you, Kathy. Moderator, any other comments?
This is the moderator. No additional requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So, Roseanne, if you would like to address some of those questions that Kathy was putting.
I'll address it, and then I might need a clarifying, I might have a clarifying question for Kathy. So if we could leave her so she can still communicate, that would be great. So in terms of the first question, why only licensees from other states? Why not pre-licensees? That was because in looking at the language, the language for the other states seems to pretty, for the most part, address licensees. Now, whether or not they have something in their law like we do that says licensees equal registrants, I don't know, but we kind of thought that, you know, there's a lot of different, when you have pre-registrants, there's supervision issues, there's how they're able to be supervised, there's a lot of different laws that come into play. So we kind of just thought, if we're going to do this and try it out, let's just start with licensees and see how that works before we add you know, other complications of somebody maybe not being supervised properly in the other state, and getting into all the interaction with those laws. So that was the reasoning there. I'm not sure I totally understand the continuous versus totality of hours. we just chose 30 consecutive days rather than a number of hours, because it provides a little bit more security from somebody abusing the system. It's 30 continuous, it would be 30 continuous or consecutive days. If you say a certain number of hours, then it does open it up for somebody maybe that's in another state that has a permanent California resident client. If you say, oh, you can do 30 hours a year, then they could do therapy every other week for a full year, and every year and never get licensed. So there's less room for abuse with the 30 consecutive days. And then they would have to transition, either get a California license or transition the person to another therapist. So that was the thought there. In terms of the Board of Psychology, I don't know exactly how long that they've had that in their law. I believe it's been in their law for a long time, like at least 10 years. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I believe it's been there for quite some time. They don't have a lot of feedback. They occasionally get unlicensed practice enforcement cases, but they don't require a registration or anything. So a lot of times, like if somebody's using that, they wouldn't necessarily know, or they don't necessarily track it, because they're not required. If somebody's going to do that, they're not required to register with the board. The only way they would find out if there was a violation is if they got a complaint. So we decided to take a kind of a different approach, and a little bit more, we want to know what's going on and who's practicing, so that we can kind of regulate, whether that's still going on or not. So that, hopefully, Kathy, does that answer your questions?
Moderator, I don't know if Kathy will be able to respond. If not, if you may open the channel so that we make sure we address the concern that Kathy brought to our attention. Is that okay, Moderator?
Yes, I have sent a request.
Yeah, ahead, thank you so much.
Okay, I think that was Kathy indicating that she's happy with the responses. So
okay.
Okay.
My audio came delayed, so I wasn't sure who was talking. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Kathy. So we're back to the board. I thank you, Moderator. We have a motion on the floor, moved by me, second by John Savick. If there are any additional comments, suggestions, I don't see anyone with the hands raised, so we can go to a vote. Christina, if you can help us do that, thank you.
Could you repeat that motion for me, please?
Roseanne?
Yes. So the motion is to make the discussed changes, which would be to move the length of the temporary practice allowance from 60 consecutive days to 30 consecutive days. And then also include a requirement that the therapist doing the temporary practice allowance needs to provide the client with the temporary practice client with the board's contact information. And Steve and I are going to work the details out on that with language. So the motion is to make those discussed changes, make any non-substantive changes, and bring to the November board meeting for consideration as a legislative proposal.
Thank you. And I'll do the vote now. Max Disposti?
Yes.
Abigail Ortega?
Yes.
John Sovic?
Yes.
Wendy Strack?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you all for the conversation. Thank you, Christina. So we're moving now to agenda item number 5, which is the discussion and possible recommendations that are regarding advertising laws and regulations. Roseanne will introduce this item as well. Thank you, Roseanne.
Yes, so this has been a discussion that we've been wanting to have for some time. We've had some requests as an agenda item to look at revisit our advertising regulations, because they haven't been updated for a while, and the world, of course, since they've been updated, has changed. So we have regulations. It's California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 1811, sets forth the board's requirements for advertising for its licensees and registrants. And then on the website, the board also provides an advertising requirement fact sheet, which explains the regulations, and it provides examples of acceptable advertising. So the last significant changes that we made to the advertising regulations were in 2013. So we've had some differing questions and requests come up. So we wanted to start the conversation, not necessarily looking at any language today, but just kind of see what the concerns are and how the committee might wish to approach them. So a couple of the questions that we've had more frequently are, is it appropriate to use nicknames in advertisements if other identifying information is also included? Another question is, but when we formed these advertising regulations in 2013, it was really before social media became a really common way of putting oneself out there professionally. So a lot of therapists might have an Instagram page or a Twitter page. And so how do you advertise in those venues when there's restrictions on the number of characters able to be displayed, like in an Instagram header or a Twitter header? And then any other issues and concerns? Those are some that I've heard. Is there anything else that we want to look at if we're going to look at the advertising regulations? So I've included in attachment A the advertising regulations and also the FAQ that's on our website that we currently provide to our licensees and registrants. The law also has a definition of advertising and advertisement, and I've included that in the packet. I would note that the board's LPCC Practice Act provides a slightly different definition of advertisement. Nothing majorly so, but I would recommend at some point, if the board is so inclined, that we make that consistent with the other practice acts. So I don't really see a reason for it to be different. There's no reference to the definition of public communication that applies to all of DCA in it. And it just is worded a little bit differently about radio and television broadcasting. So I'd suggest, possibly making LPCC's law the same as the other three. The law I've also provided for reference provides a definition of public communication and a prohibition of false advertising. That's DCA wide. It applies to all of the DCA boards, and that can be found in Business and Professions Code section 651. And then I would also note that marriage and family therapists, associates, and trainees have their own additional specific advertising requirements in statute. I'm not sure why this is. It was put in law several years ago, and it's just more specific for MFTs. MFT and associate trainees specifies that there's additional information that needs to be contained in an advertisement for those particular types. That they actually have to put in their ads that the person is a registrant or trainee, the employer's name, and that the associate or trainee is supervised by a licensed person. And so those particular MFT specific statutes are shown in attachment C. So really the purpose of today is just to kick off the discussion and see where we want it to go. So I'll open it up for that now.
Thank you. Thank you, Roseanne. And as always, let's start from the board. If there are any questions or considerations to share, looking around to see if there are any raised hands. If I don't see you, please feel free to jump in. I think John, yes. Hey, you're muted. Yeah.
I was waiting because I wanted to see if Wendy or Abigail would lead this off. But Roseanne, there's some things that I think we should definitely consider. And a lot of this has to do with the electronic form of advertising, including things such as naming of websites. As a trainee or an associate, can I be John Sovek Therapy? Because in the title of that website, it would never say John Sovek Therapy under the supervision of. So is that potentially an interesting loophole that needs to be addressed? Looking at things like video content, TikTok, YouTube channels and stuff like that, identifying within the context of those videos that I'm John Sovek LMFT or John Sovek Associate MFT, that those are some things that in this modern day and age of marketing, we might want to consider. And I think also trying to expand our definition of what marketing might look like. When I look at a lot of these regulations, it kind of looks at the handing the business card, having something on a directory site type of marketing, and that's not how people are marketing today. And so I think we need to kind of sit back and look at well, where are people advertising and what do we need to address? Once again, I think looking at the electronic side of it, because that is where most marketing for therapists is taking place these days.
Thank you, John. I would like to add also that obviously, as you all can see, we are exposed to marketing, advertisement of behavioral health that comes from all over the U.S., right? So obviously, there will always be I think the effort is really important to regulate these aspects. Also, we have to be aware that we come across ads from all over the state with different kind of regulations. I've seen horrible things out there from online services that provide, you can text your therapist anytime you want to, kind of like the clashes with our ethics here in California. So obviously there's always going to be a limit, but I think it's very important for us to define whatever that's going to be a way how to promote services, as John says, because as someone else has said before, California is leading the way in the conversation. So hopefully we can be by example in making sure that our consumers are protected and well informed and not misled and misguided when they are seeking services that they are vital to the well-being of the people that we serve. So I don't know how that's going to look like. So I'm really, really open to this conversation and see what other feedbacks people might bring or concerns into this. So thank you all. Do we have any other member?
Can I continue with one thought, Max?
Yes, sure.
I think it's important to understand that any regulations or guidelines we put in place for marketing and advertising, by the sheer speed of how the market shifts, we're basically catching up. We're not going to be able to anticipate what's going to be coming ahead. So I think a lot of this work we're doing, as Roseanne pointed out, is 2013, and the online marketing world has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
So I think our best thing is to create a framework using these regulations versus trying to create a punitive system. Because if I have a framework that says, hey, anytime you create a TikTok video, your first sentence needs to be, hi, I'm John Sovek, a licensed marriage and family therapist. That gives me a framework. It doesn't mean I'm being punished or as punitive. It lets me know this is how I need to approach it. So I'd like us to look at these regulations as a way to catch up with the market, and also rather to create a framework that I, as a therapist, can then build my work off of.
Point well taken. Thank you, John. Thank you for that. Are there any other comments, observation from our board member? Abigail.
Yeah, I wanted to just add, I think that this, after I read this, I combed through, my own social media and everything, and it's all very doable, all very doable, and it's just providing consumers with more information. So, that they're not receiving false, fraudulent, misleading, right, or deceptive messages from people that are not licensed, right? And they get to choose, right? They have choice once they have that information as to who they want to get services from ongoingly or even listen to. So, I felt that everything was workable and doable inside of, this new world of marketing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abigail. So before we move forward, I don't know if that, Roseanne, was translated into a possible motion. Do we have a language so that I can go out to the public, to the audience for other comments with something that's tangible? If we have one.
I'm not sure we have a motion yet. I'm hearing more, we want to focus more on the video electronic side. So I think that could be a motion. I'd like to hear a little bit more from the stakeholders, and then kind of maybe formulate what the next steps are. The next step is, I think, definitely a part of the motion would be to do more research and bring it back to the committee. But whether we want to focus on something specific, that's kind of, I haven't formulated that perfectly yet. So
okay, no, it makes sense. Yeah, sorry, it makes sense because we are at the beginning. We have been entertaining this conversation in a while, but not long enough to have gathered all the information. So definitely, let's go to the audience and see if there are any comments and sharing. Moderator, if you can please help us to open. Thank you.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. Simply click on the question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen, and type comment in the text field and send it to all panelists. I do have a request. I'm going to send a request to unmute Kathy Atkins' microphone. Give me just a moment. Request has been sent.
Hi, Kathy Atkins with CAMPT. I want to thank everyone for bringing this up. The technology aspect is way outside my expertise, so I'm definitely deferring to you experts. But thank you, because I do think as we're moving into the next, or have moved into the new century, it's nice that the regulatory boards are getting caught up as well. So I know it's a challenge for so many boards. So thank you for addressing this and assessing it. And I don't think this is the time to bring it up, but I want to beat the drum CAMP keeps beating on advertising, and that I hope the BBS does take a look at advertising and change of names, dead names, things of that nature that I do feel needs to be addressed by all of the DCA, including including the BBS. It's not just a BBS issue. It's a regulatory board issue, but I'm just gonna make my my plug here as well. So I don't think it's anything to address today. I just kind of wanted to throw it out there as hopefully this is something that we continue to see discussed at the BBS as well as the DCA. So again, thank you all for addressing this. I have no comment outside my expertise, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And actually, we're having that conversation, as a matter of fact. Roseanne, I see you pointing something out.
Yeah, I just wanted to let Kathy know that we are talking to DCA and looking at that issue behind the scenes. I'm hoping to be able to report something back at our January Q&A on that one.
Yeah, exactly. That's what. Thank you, Roseanne. Moderator, any other comments?
Yes, individual identified as Ben Cadwell. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
Good morning. Thank you. Ben Caldwell, LMFT. Just for some additional context on the electronic side here, this came up a long time ago, and I went back looking through my notes to see if I could find it. Apparently, it was in the July 21st, 2011 meeting of the Policy and Advocacy Committee on page 6 of the minutes there. And the discussion at that point had to do with tweets and Google ads and related advertising formats that are digital but are limited in terms of the length that you have available and how do you do disclosures there. And discussion from board staff at the time came down to as long as that tweet or Google ad or whatever does not contain a phone number or an email address or other means of direct contact, but instead simply links to a website that has all of the required disclosures and information on it, that the board would consider that tweet or Google ad and the website together as a single advertisement for the purposes of assessing compliance. I got to tell you, I think that's a great way to do it because that at least ensures that prospective clients have been exposed to the required disclosures prior to making contact with the clinician. And so if this process were simply to be a way to more formally codify that, that seems like a pretty good, elegant solution to me. I also want to second what Kathy had mentioned about name changes, dead names, all that kind of stuff, because there is that regulation that says that licensees and registrants need to include their full legal name as it exists on file with the board. But I think there is some confusion about whether include simply means put it once somewhere or whether that has to be the only form of the name that's used. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Moderator?
Yes, Rebecca Gonzalez, I'm going to submit a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello, Rebecca Gonzalez with the National Association of Social Workers California chapter. Thank you for this discussion. I'm going to third Kathy's comment about dead names, but I also have a question looking at the advertisements for registered or for ASWs. And so under E on the background information, under attachment A, where it says registered associate clinical social worker or registered associate CSW, the abbreviation ASW shall not be used in an advertisement unless the title registered associate clinical social worker appears in the advertisement. I know it's always been a little confusing that we don't use ACSW, and it's because that interferes with the credential that our national NASW gives. But I just wondered if has this been a problem? Is this confusing to folks? I was a little surprised to see the registered associate CSW. I didn't know that we ever used that, but just curious. Thank you.
I can answer that. When I reread these as part of preparing this, I thought that was a little weird too, that what had been chosen was registered associate CSW. That's been in there for a long time. I don't know why it was chosen. I think that if there is something it's not something that I don't hear ASWs referring to themselves as associate CSWs, just in context of speaking. So I think that we can put that discussion on the table if there's something else that would be better. I think it's just that's what was acceptable at the time.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any other comments, moderator?
Yes, one more comment. This one was written out. Carmen's microphone doesn't work. Should I read it out?
Sure, please.
Yes. I think most therapists are following the advertising requirements with websites. Maybe just I think it was meant to say reiterate for the therapists who may not include everything needed, who have done this truly by error. There are big companies like BetterHelp who practice unethical practices. There are a lot of different types of companies popping up, parentheses, BetterHelp, Talkspace, 7 Cups, etc., close parentheses. Some of these platforms promote inaccurate information about therapy, which may cause confusion for current / future therapy clients.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. Are there any other comments?
No additional requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. If board members, are there any other comments or suggestions? Or I'm trying to, Wendy, sorry, I missed you. Go ahead.
Okay. I actually wanted to wait and hear from the stakeholders and from the licensees. Just as a public member, this isn't really something that I'm totally familiar with, but wanted to kind of echo a few of the comments I heard, and then even from fellow board members. Technology is going to continue to change and evolve, and if we update the statute to reflect what is possible now in terms of advertising, we're just going to keep chasing, the technology or the requirements of the technology. So if we're able to kind of create something that can move with the times or move with the technologies and isn't really focused on how do we make these regulations work for the technologies that exist now, and maybe kind of set up more, like John kind of referenced, a framework. So what are the kinds of things that need to be included in your advertisements, and that way as the mechanisms change, the regulations can kind of move with it, or provide some way of updating that, without updating statutes each time. So kind of focused on that. Obviously, the board's doing work on the dead name issue, so did want to just kind of note that is something we do need to be sure is included in our final proposal. And then also wanted to reiterate,
what Roseanne said about creating alignment in the various license types. And so making sure that we're getting the LEP statutes in line with the others.
Very true. And thank you, Wendy, for reiterating our work that is coming out very soon to be a public discussion as well about the name and the representations as well. So thank you. Thank you for that. Any other comments? I'm looking around to see if I'm not missing anyone. Oh, John, yes, I see your hands. It's on my screen.
I figured this version of a hand seems to catch your attention more easily than the electronic version, so that's why I do it that way.
Or you could make some noise too, so that's good. But thank you.
First of all, I was not part of P&A in June, July 2021, so thank you, Ben Caldwell, for having notes that reminded us about languaging. I think that actually is a really good approach to this framework style that we're talking of approaches. So if there is, that the point of contact with all the information is cached someplace, as in a website or a psychology directory, then that does address a lot of these issues without having to, contain to not be shut down in marketing using some of these sources. So thank you, Ben Caldwell, for bringing that up. It's a great thing. I have an idea for Steve. We're going to suggest your favorite thing in the world. You ready? Is it possible that in the process of building this, we actually do need to hear more from our stakeholders? And would it be wise to hold one of the listening sessions, looking at people under all of the licensees and learn from real world experience, what they're finding in their marketing and advertising, what they're having trouble with, what regulations make sense, which are confusing, and to actually take the time to learn from our stakeholders what they're experiencing in real time and where they're having those oops moments, I think I messed up, and then not sleeping for a whole night. I think it might be a really valuable thing in trying to create real world regulations. So we build this framework based on information that all of our stakeholders are actually experiencing. Look, I scared Steve off the screen.
I think maybe lost connection. Actually, I see all our stuff without video, so I don't know what's happening. Maybe there's something at the BBS over there. And then Abby, I see your hand raised. I just want to give a second for Steve if he has heard that comment.
Steve is trying to connect right now.
I thought so, yeah. John, just hold that thought. Let's move with I see Abigail with the hands raised, and then we go back to Steve and you. Abigail.
I went through the BBS website real quick, and so ASWs are referred as associate clinical social worker on the BBS website. And I would say to remove the word registered, because you are registered, right, if you're an ASW. So it's redundant.
I would speak to that. So the registered, I think, is for the public, because I don't know that they necessarily, I think the reason that we think it included registered in there is because when we say associate, we don't necessarily, we know what that means, but the public doesn't necessarily know that that's our registration versus a license. I think that's why in there. The social work is a little bit, and Rebecca can probably explain it better, that there is I believe it's a ASWB or it's a NASW term where they have something called Associate Clinical Social Workers, or ACSW. So their official name is Associate Clinical Social Workers, but we don't use the ACSW title because that matches another national title, and so it would be confusing. So that's why they use the ASW, which is why I think her point being that why the CSW is confusing, because that's not really used anywhere. So that you will see places where it's where we do refer them though as associate clinical social workers, and that is correct. We've just been asked to not use the ACSW because it matches a national designation. Rebecca, please correct me if I got some part of that wrong.
Right. Steve, are you back with us?
So I'm over here.
Okay.
Hey, Steve, can you close the curtains behind you?
Oh yeah, can you? Hey, Jonna, that wasn't me trying to get out of work, and yeah, my system for some reason just went completely down. So I just wanted to make sure, I heard what you're talking about, like the listening session. I think we could do that, or we might have some other, maybe, I don't like the term survey, or something to the effect of where I think maybe we could come out with our ideas as to what we want this framework to look like, and then somehow, maybe even outside of the policy, I kind of present that to people and maybe get feedback somehow, because that would be good. So I like that idea.
Possibly using your Facebook Fridays as a forum for that as well.
Actually, yeah, that's a good idea.
Great.
Because those are people on an electronic social medium having a conversation. That might be a really good place to gather some thoughts and ideas.
That's a good idea. Or our TikTok Tuesdays, which I'm starting up.
What?
Just kidding. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
I did say once you should open a channel, Steve. But anyway, let's move on. Are there any other comments? Abigail, I don't know if that's an old raised hand. Otherwise, please go ahead. I see you.
Oh no, no, she answered. It really just goes back to the consumers and what are they understanding when they read that. And that, I mean, again, right, providing more information informs them as to, who they're listening to and what services they want. From who? Got it.
I do see Rebecca's hand raised though, so she might want to weigh in on that a little bit further.
Sure. I would like to. No, we can go back and see. You said Rebecca, right, Roseanne? Yeah. Moderator, can you please open and see if Rebecca Gonzalez would like to chime in again?
Yes, this is the moderator. I have sent us a unmute request.
Great. So Rebecca Gonzalez, NASW, California. Just briefly, Roseanne, just to on what you commented, CSW is a title that people in other states use sometimes, clinical social worker, but I don't think they really use that in California. And just so you know, the ACSW title at the national level stands for Academy of Certified Social Workers. So it means something totally different, but just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's very, very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so back to our board. I believe this is a good conversation. Sorry, that's for sure. So if I understood correctly, Roseanne, and then I see you, Abigail. Again, I mean, feel free to go in. I just want to ask. Oh, okay. It was just yeah. Thank you. So Roseanne, obviously, we don't have a defined motion at this point. Definitely the intent of this committee is to bring this conversation to the board correctly. So do we have to, though, define that? Do we need a vote for that? Or we can just like...
What I'm hearing, I don't think this is anywhere near ready to go to the board as a proposal yet.
Okay.
And I think Steve's coming in here too. So I'm hearing a couple of different things that we could possibly do. And I think that the motion would be that it comes back to the P&A committee. But I'm hearing that I think it would be a good idea to look at the 2011 P&A meeting that Ben referenced to kind of see what was talked about then and how the board was interpreting, because that was a long time ago and possibly, with different legal. And so we can take a look at that and talk about that. I'm hearing that we need to maybe work with Rebecca to look at the CSW title. That's one change. And then the bigger thing I'm hearing is that maybe that we need to focus on developing a framework for video or electronic type of ads. And I think that entails a couple of different things. I think we need to look at the definition in Business and Professions Code 651 that talks about, kind of defines advertising broadly. I don't think it would be possible to make any specific changes to that section because it's DCA wide, but I think we could possibly use that in our laws, in the definitions that I referenced in each of our practice acts that defines advertising. I'm thinking that we need to maybe revisit that definition in statute and kind of maybe make sure that it covers all of our bases. So that would be one thing. And maybe what I'm kind of hearing is make sure that that's defined as maybe video communication or electronic communication versus versus written communication, and maybe have different frameworks for those two. I think we've already gotten maybe the written communication. We've got some pretty good standards there, but I'm hearing that the electronic hasn't necessarily caught up. So I think that could kind of be a focus. That's what I got out of it. So I don't know what everybody thinks about that.
Okay, so I would say we can, for lack of better words, table in a way of continue the conversation, but not moving forward with until we have gathering more data and for us to go back to the board. Correct, Roseanne?
Yeah, I would recommend that I don't even know if there needs to be a motion, but that staff continue to kind of formulate take the information that we learned today and what I outlined and formulate those thoughts and bring it back to a future P&A committee meeting sometime in the spring.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like we need a motion because it's not a controversial, it's not everyone obviously wants to have this conversation. We want to move it forward, and we are, the staff is already doing that. So it's not like we're taking action that goes in against what's already happening. So I would propose to move forward to the next item agenda unless there are any other comments or suggestions from my fellow board member, but I don't see any hands raised. Okay, then let's move to item number 6, which is discussion and possible recommendation regarding the proposed amendments to the Business and Professions Code. And of course, Roseanne is going to introduce us to this as well. Thank you, Roseanne.
Yes, so every year the staff looks into, every year I should say, the legislature runs what's called a committee bill or an omnibus bill. And it's a cleanup sort of bill for technical or non-controversial items that the legislature maybe needs to run that maybe don't justify like having their own bill because they're just very small, limited things. They have to be non-controversial. Usually it's very technical cleanup. So we have identified 2 sets of amendments that the board might wish to consider for inclusion in this year's upcoming omnibus or committee bill. And so the first one is a proposal to add a section to our board's general statutes that talk about how the board is governed, add section 4990.11 regarding online license and registration verification. So currently, if an individual needs to verify their license or registration to other states or employers, that the employer or the other state is requesting basically a certificate from the board proving that they're licensed, then that person needs to submit a request from the board for a certification, and they can do it either online via Breeze or they can do it in writing, and they need to pay a $25 license certification fee. And then the board then sends a certificate verifying that person's license or registration to the address that they want to send it to within 4 to 6 weeks. I've included in the packet a link to that request form online. So the process can be time intensive, both for the licensee waiting for the certification because it takes 4 to 6 weeks, and for staff because staff has to, actually verify the license and send the certification out. So there's a workload there. Other DCA boards, most notably the Board of Pharmacy, have a code section in law that a verification may be done online via the Breeze license verification feature. And so basically they have something, the pharmacy board has something in their law that says that the Breeze, that their online license verification feature serves as a way to certify the license. The board has a letter on its website stating that the online license lookup may be used as what's called a primary source verification, basically that we've verified that the person meets the requirements for licensure. I've included a copy of that letter, but we don't have anything in law that says this. So our legal counsel recommends adding a statute very similar to what Board of Pharmacy has done, stating that basically our licensing information contained on our online licensing lookup may be used for license verification purposes. So I've included in attachment A the proposed language of what that would look like. And stating this affirmatively in law would clear up any confusion about whether or not that serves as a primary source verification or not. There's a certain number of benefits. The license information on the website is updated regularly, nightly, and it's not a static document like mailing out a printed license certification is. There would be a fee for looking up a license on Breeze and waiting 4 to 6 weeks for the verification to issue. And processing is automatic. So we're proposing to add that code section. However, in recognition that some states might still want a paper certification or somebody might want a paper certification for some reason, we propose leaving the fee and the process for issuing a certification letter of good standing certificate in place so that there is the option if somebody wants to request a certification the old way that they still can do so. It's not necessarily hurting anybody to have it there, but Breeze is definitely a viable option. So that's the first the first proposal for the omnibus bill for this year. The second proposal for the omnibus bill is just a really technical cleanup. Basically, a few years back, a bill was run to allow MFT or LEPs to supervise the other board's associate and basically LEPs can now supervise associates and MFT trainees who are gaining hours toward licensure. So current LMFT statute discusses the fact that it has a list of which acceptable license types can supervise MFT trainees. And the list includes licensed educational psychologists. However, if you go to the licensed educational psychologist law, it's when it's discussing what they can supervise, MFT trainees are not included in the list. So we are proposing a minor amendment to LEP law that states that an LEP can also supervise an MFT trainee. It's consistent with what's already in MFT law. It's just to make things make sure that everything's consistent across the law. So those are the two proposals, and so I will open it up for discussion and questions now.
Thank you, Roseanne. And any members of the board that would like to chime in on this and discuss? John Sobek, I saw your hands. No, I didn't. Oh, anyone else? I'm browsing around to see. Okay. Is anyone that would like to move a motion in any directions so we can go to the public with a proposal?
I'll make a motion to approve the recommended changes.
Thank you, Wendy. And actually, I would like to Roseanne?
So the motion will be to approve the recommended changes and to bring to the board for consideration as a legislative proposal.
Wonderful.
That's what I meant.
Exactly. I knew it. Thank you, Wendy. I would like to second that. And moderator, if we can open to the public to see if there are any comments and inputs. Thank you.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click on that question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen. And in the text field that appears, type comment or I would like to make a comment, and make sure that goes to all panelists and click the button that says send. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, moderator. And so we're back to the board. We have a motion moved by Wendy Strack and second by me. If there are any other comments, we can move to a vote. I don't see any. So Christina, thank you.
Max Disposti?
Yes.
Abigail Ortega?
Yes.
John Sovek?
Yes.
Wendy Strack?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I would like just to grant 5 minutes break, or maybe 10 minutes, so it makes sense for everyone. 10 minutes break is 10:25. If we can come back 10:35, that will be great. And thank you all. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. And officially restart this meeting. Welcome back, everyone, to the Board of Behavioral Science Advocacy Committee meetings. Today is October 14, 2022. My name is Max Disposti, pronouns he, him. I'm the board chair and chair of this committee. We were moving on items 6. Am I correct, folks? I believe we are moving on item 6. No. Item 7.
Item 7.
Yes. Item 7, discussion and possible recommendation regarding changes to enforcement regulations and professional conducts, amount of fines, uniform standards related to substance abuse and disciplinary guidelines. And I believe also this is introduced by Roseanne. Yes. Thank you, Roseanne.
Oh, it's actually me.
Oh, it's actually...
That's okay, no worries.
Christy, thank you so much and welcome today. Thank you for being with us. Yes, number 7.
Thank you. So this item has been around for a while, and it had to sit on the back burner because of some legislation that passed that affected it. It contains the uniform standards related to substance abuse and the disciplinary guidelines. And there's also some regulation language changes that we're looking at. The uniform standards and disciplinary guidelines are incorporated by reference into the regulations, so they actually are a regulation as well. But we're looking at code sections as well for some of this, but we're not going to talk about the code sections today. It's just this document. So we talked about this, the changes. We went over some of the changes back in July at the July meeting. And this is a long and complex document, so it's going to require some continuing work. And we are also working with the Department of Consumer Affairs Regulation Unit attorneys, and they did provide us with some feedback. We weren't able to resolve all of it yet. So there are some sections that we won't be talking about just because there's going to be some language changes, and so we didn't want to present anything that would be changing significantly later, so that this meeting will focus on areas less likely to change as a result of working with the attorneys and such. So I'm going to just go over particular areas because this is so long and complex. So, we're welcome to talk about anything that's proposed as a change, but I do want to, in the interest of time and focusing on important areas and the things that we talked about in the last meeting. So I'm only going to go over certain things, but again, we're not necessarily limited to just that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the uniform standards related to substance abuse. And just, it was clarified to me that we really cannot make anything other than minor changes because they're uniform standards that are DCA wide, and they are in, because they're a uniform standard, we can't do things that are all that different from what the standard provides. So I just wanted to point out there's a few changes that we found out we were not able to make because of that, but we have been able to make some of the changes. So that's listed there in the memo as well. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So I want to jump to the penalty guidelines. And one of the things we talked about at the last meeting is whether a question was raised as to whether the 5-year minimum length of probation that we have in most of our categories was too punitive, especially since the board is moving toward a more rehabilitative perspective. So I went through and I pulled the categories that have a minimum 5-year probation and listed them in the memo so that if the committee would like to maybe propose that some of these should stay at 5 years, or maybe we should look at reducing some, we are able to do that. So Those are commission of an act punishable as a sexually related crime, impaired ability to function safely due to mental or physical illness affecting competency or chemical dependency. Then we have chemical dependency or use of drugs or controlled substances or alcohol with the client while performing services, intentionally or recklessly causing physical or emotional harm to the client, gross negligence or incompetence, conviction of a crime substantially related to duties, qualifications, and functions of a licensee or registrant, violation of exam security, or impersonating a licensee or allowing impersonation. So obviously some of those are pretty severe. Probably don't want to look at reducing it, but I wanted to make sure you saw all of them so that you can make a comparison and see if there's any you would like to discuss.
Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you so much for that introductions. Are there any, we can move on with the discussion or conversation within our board. If there is any questions, comments, proposals, I'm moving around to see if there are any. Doesn't appear to be. And Christy, this is obviously my question to you is, it's how a recommendation will look like in this case in terms of a language in
Right. I don't think we necessarily need motions at this point because we still have a lot of work to do on this document. So I think that will come later at a later meeting.
As we collect more inputs. Thank you. So at this point, I don't see, oh, Abigail, hi. Thank you.
Yeah, so I haven't been on the board long enough to have seen all of these, right? And I'm just curious, like, what does violating exam security look like? Or impersonating licensee, like, because I'm like, when I read it, I'm like, oh, would I want to give them a minimum of 5 years for probation, or would those be like categories where maybe it would be less? But I don't know enough about those violations to. So can anyone?
So, well, the violate exam security, we have had that happen in the past. It's very rare, but somebody actually, farming questions or subverting our exams somehow, cheating or selling exam questions off. I mean, it can happen. So basically, that I think we've put that at we need to protect those exams. And if our exams are compromised, then we have to go through the process of actually, remaking the exam, which can count. It's pretty expensive. So I think that's why we have that's something that, we want to make sure that has a possible high, a high minimum on that. Impersonating a license, just like it said, it's kind of like unlicensed practice. Somebody out there, performing therapeutic services, psychotherapeutic services without a license, can cause a lot of harm, and we don't want that. So.
And so for the exam security, what are some of the disciplinary practices for them to get off probation?
That's what we have, kind of the standard stuff. It just depends on what we present and what it ends up. I mean, and that's why if you look at these guidelines, it'll show you the other things that we would consider. I mean, definitely for this would be probably education in law and ethics. It would be, I mean, there's always a cost recovery in this associated with that, but there's a whole menu of things. So it's really hard to say it's case by case. So that's what we have to look at.
And so would that take 5 years for someone to be reformed and, get the message that that's unacceptable?
Well, that's what I think. The 5-year minimum is kind of a deterrent, I think, at first. Once again, as we do have they have the ability, once you go on probation, to actually come back before the board, as you know. So to reduce that penalty or try to get it reduced. And so the 5 years out there is really kind of our deterrent. But then, if you end up with a 5-year, you do have the opportunity to come back to the board to kind of demonstrate your rehabilitation or what you've done, since then. So you could possibly reduce that. So that's something to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for the question. John?
Yeah. Hey, I just want to check. Steve, Christina had to leave us. Is someone covering all of our stuff?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Christina had to leave us. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I'm on it.
Oh,
yeah.
Good. Okay, so a couple of questions I have, and I did space out a little bit because Christina messaged me about this, and so I was a little distracted for a second. Christy, do we know, or did you mention, and I apologize if you did, how AB 1706 and AB 2188 are going to affect any of these policies? Because 1706 seals old cannabis convictions, and 2188 addresses like using cannabis outside of a workplace situation and how you can't have employment discrimination. And I'm just wondering if this has been woven into this conversation at this point yet.
It has not. That's something we can take a look at. I'm not sure how exactly it would fit into disciplinary guidelines, but we can certainly talk about that.
And because my thought is there have been cases that have come before us where we have openly talked about cannabis use, not in a work situation, but in a life situation that has affected the disciplinary action. So I suspect as a board, that's going to have to change since this bill has passed. And also the idea that these old convictions are now going to be sealed, that is also going to mean that they will not be something we can consider in a disciplinary discussion. And I only know the surface of these bills. I don't know the depth of them. So I just think that's something we need to consider when we're looking at this.
For sure. What was the other one that you mentioned? So AB 1706?
1706 and 2188. These are both ABs.
Okay. All righty.
You had also mentioned about like discussing some of the minimum 5-year probations. And,
right. So that's what, that's where we're at this point. Yeah.
And for me, actually, I'm gonna pause there.
Okay, Abigail. I don't know. Yeah.
So, I guess back to conversation with Steve. So, has it been a deterrent? Do we know if it's been effective or if it's stayed the same or gotten worse?
I mean, we rarely have I think it's been, in the time I've been here, 10 years, we've only once had to go after somebody for exam security. So whether it's working as a deterrent or not, I'm not sure. On that one, impersonating a licensee, it gives us that. It's a little bit different with the unlicensed practice. It's a good question whether it's a deterrent or not.
Yeah, or in general, right? For all of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of being a determinant is knowing exactly what the violations possibly, what they can lead to, which I think is another thing with education with licensees, explaining what could, these are the possibilities if you violate these laws. So, I mean, for my personal belief, I mean, if I saw that, yes, I was about to, commit something and it was like, well, 5 years as opposed to 1 year. I don't know. I mean, it is, I think it would deter just because of the severity of it. So it's hard to really quantify that though, if it really is a deterrent. So good question though. So.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you all. Let me see if there are any other comments or inputs. Perhaps we can open to the public to see if there are any other observation as well. Moderator, thank you.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions will be on the screen for your reference. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of the square, type comment, send it to all panelists. I do have individual identified as Rebecca Gonzalez who would like to comment. Give me just a moment. I've sent a request to unmute your microphone, Rebecca.
Great, thank you. Rebecca Gonzalez, NASW, California. I just wanted to point out two here, and thank you for having this discussion. The second one, impaired ability to function safely due to mental illness or physical illness affecting competency or chemical dependency. I guess I saw this on a case-by-case basis, because the next one is actually talking about doing that while performing services, which I see as more serious. But if someone is suffering from a mental illness or physical illness or chemical dependency, I guess I just see that as something that, like I said, is a case-by-case basis. And then also conviction of a crime substantially related to duties, qualifications, and functions of a licensee. That is just one of those nebulous areas that I'm not really sure what it means. I mean, so it also seemed like it could possibly be a case-by-case basis. So just wanted to bring those two up and see if you had any thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Individual identified as Ben Cadwell would like to make a comment, and I'm going to unmute your microphone in just a moment. Or request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Good morning, Ben Caldwell, MFT. Thanks, Christy, and I really appreciate the board and the committee taking a good, thorough look at the disciplinary guidelines. The proposals for changes that are here, they seem fine. I don't have any issue with any of the proposals that are here. And Christy, thank you for that list of the ones that have a 5-year minimum probation. It does seem like it would be useful to approach this from a data-informed place. And otherwise, it feels kind of like rearranging furniture. It would be really helpful to get a clearer data-based understanding of whether the disciplinary process is working as it should, whether it is effectively rehabilitating clinicians. The limited amount of data that's been made available so far suggests that it's not. And I think that could go a long way toward informing the kinds of changes to disciplinary processes and rules that could make the overall process much more effective. So my hope is that as this conversation goes forward, these proposals will be accompanied by more data on what kinds of violations are coming in, how they're being adjudicated, and what the results of those probations wind up being. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
This is the moderator. No additional requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Thank you so much. And we're back to the board. Are there any other possible comments or recommendations or questions? John.
I do have a question. I think Ben Caldwell brought up an interesting point, and that is the purpose of these guidelines. Are they about rehabilitation or are they about public protection? I understand that our duty as the Board of Behavioral Science. I do understand that our duty as Board of Behavioral Sciences primarily is consumer protection. So I think there is this balance in creating these, regulations. And our job, once again, is not to be punitive, but to be rehabilitative, to support a clinician in their moving through whatever the disciplinary action is. But ultimately, it is about public protection. So I think that's something like weighing out what that balance is and what our duty in creating these regulations is.
Thank you, John. I see a hand from Gina. Gina, I don't know if if you would like to say something. I see your hand raised, so maybe it's just.
Thank you, Max. This is Gina Beaver, Probation and Discipline Manager. I just wanted to add in about the minimum years of probation, the minimum years that we're talking about. I often see a deviation from this. These are guidelines. So even if there's a minimum of 5 years for these different categories that are listed, very often I see a reduction with justification. So if it's in a proposed decision, being that it went through a hearing, I will see the judge justify a reduction and maybe recommend a 3-year probation. That is very often, as well as in a stipulation, if it's through the board, based on mitigation received, then Steve will agree to reduce, and it's often reduced. I see a lot of these situations be 3 years and not 5.
Thank you, Gina. That was very, very helpful for sure. Thank you. Board member, are there any other questions or recommendations?
This is Bob Silvic again. I did have a question and now I can't find where it's at, but it was talking about removing the education piece and connected to substance use disorder penalties. And in it, the justification was that rehabilitation programs have education pieces. I think having the education piece on substance use disorders in a clinical approach would actually be important to try and keep in play versus what happens in a rehabilitation experience where a client is learning about like the education of substance use disorders within their own personal confines. Our education, we're looking at it as a person who's a clinician and how that could influence their work. Also in the requirement for legal...
I'm sorry, John, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Sure.
So I was kind of taking this piece by piece. So if you're not talking about the probation length at this point, right? Moving on, I think you might have missed kind of when I was talking earlier about how we're taking this piece by piece.
You are correct, and I apologize.
Okay, that's okay. No worries. So if you wouldn't mind, I think that's one of the... Actually, I think it's fine to do it now as long as there's no other, if we can kind of come to an agreement. Are we leaving these all at 5 years? Is everybody okay with that? And then we can kind of resolve that.
This is Sabina. I wanted to chime in. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes, Sabina, go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you. I wanted to chime in on what Gina said real quick. Remember, like she said, they are guidelines. It's not the bright and clear rule and line in the sand, right? It's guidelines. So, if there's mitigating circumstances or even aggravating circumstances or factors, those are all considered. So I, recommend let's not, worry ourselves over that. Just know that it's just guidelines and that when warranted, they're going to be lower. When warranted, they might be higher. But I just wanted to chime in there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so it sounds,
go ahead, Christy.
If there's nobody who, okay, so if we're good then leaving all those at 5 years, sounds like?
Sounds,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and I think, actually, John, you were talking about education. And we did have a proposed amendment clarifying that education must pertain to the violation. And so you were talking about substance abuse in that context and what we might require in terms of education. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I believe this was in page 5. Where was it? I just found it again. I lost it.
Oh no.
Yes, page 5, point 4, penalty guidelines, page 19, chemical dependency.
Okay.
It says strike the education penalty option as education is always a part of rehabilitation program and therefore not necessary to specify here.
Okay.
Once again, I think education as in relating to our duties as a clinician is different than what one would actually experience in a rehabilitation program.
Got it. Okay. Gotcha. Any other feedback on that piece from anyone? It's something we can talk about. We can take that feedback back to the office and talk about it and, you know, bring back sort of our internal discussion if you would like, or if there's anybody else who has feedback on that.
Yeah, it doesn't look like at the moment, Christy, that there are any additional inputs.
Okay, well, we can definitely take a look at that.
Okay. So how do we move forward this? Because I know that it is a recommendation. Will that require a vote, and how is going to be formulated? Maybe
I think what I'll do is just come back at our next meeting, kind of like I've done under, say, gross negligence and competence, a little further down on that page, number 6. And I'll say at the X meeting, it was, you know, we had this question, staff, you know, had a discussion, and here's what we're recommending. So I think, you know, for some of these, we'll have to go back and talk with, like this one probably won't need a discussion with attorneys, but it's more like what, you know, just kind of getting an idea of what's typical for that and what type of education that's been being required. So we'll definitely bring that back with a comment at the next meeting.
Okay, John?
Kathy, just to clarify, I think I remember you and Steve mentioning this last time we talked about most of the minimum suspensions are being brought down to 60 days. So they're all consistent across the board because there were 60, 90s, and 120s in the past. And everything's being brought into a 60-day suspension now. Is that, I think, what I remember from the past conversation?
I believe, well, there's some that are minimum 30 days. Just scroll through them all, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I think in our conversations, we were doing that kind of like a consistent basis, I believe.
I do see one that's recommended at 90 days. That's the sexual orientation change efforts. But that's one that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So we can look at that when we're kind of confirming, do we like the menu of options that we're providing? So yes, but most of them are at 60 days. There's some that are 30, and it's usually a range that's suggested. All right. So I was going to skip to the penalty guidelines for gross negligence and incompetence next. That's number 6 on this page. So at the July meeting, it was questioned as to whether the terms related to alcohol and substance abuse components belong in the penalty guidelines for gross negligence and incompetence. I was able to confirm that those terms are not necessary. If the licensee has a substance use violation, then the penalties in that separate section for that violation would apply. So that's why it doesn't need to be there. However, for the next section, general unprofessional conduct, we did leave it there because we may have an issue where we become aware there's a substance use problem, but there's not a conviction. So it's handled a little differently between those two sections. And I'm not sure I'm able to fully articulate it, but in some areas we'll need it, some areas, but most of the time, we won't need the substance abuse components because we'll be able to use that separate set of penalties in addition. Okay. So that's just really just clarifying for you guys. Hopefully that's clear. Okay, and I'm learning a lot as I go along here too. So we're all, you know, really collaborating in the office as we're working on this. So,
absolutely.
All right, so the next is number 9 in the memo, penalty guidelines for improper supervision. So we would like to discuss whether suspension is always warranted in cases of improper supervision. And I know we just talked about how, you know, these are guidelines, they're not a line in the sand, but we would like to provide, you know, we are tweaking some of these because sometimes, you know, we want to give a general idea and that make sure that that general idea is of those menu options is thorough and thought through. And so this one came up that we thought maybe that would, the suspension for improper supervision should maybe be moved for a maximum penalty column. And this is because when a licensee is on probation, they are already not allowed to supervise. So in some cases, that licensee might be a good clinician, but not a good supervisor. So we did talk about this a little bit at the July 2022 meeting, but we didn't discuss, I didn't really get direction on if we wanted to do that, if everybody was good with moving that to the maximum penalty suspension of license was moved to the maximum penalty column.
And thank you, Christy. I know it's one item at a time. Are there any comments about this in particular? Because I remember, yeah, we did have a conversation, but it was not, it was at the beginning of the conversation, we haven't closed it, so for lack of a better word. Is there any comments or questions around that? To Christy.
I would also be curious too if the new supervision guidelines will actually tighten up who our supervisors are and how they're working with the trainees and associates, and that might actually be a layer that happens just before this is happening. And I think the idea of moving to suspension, the languaging is right. Not everybody's meant to be a supervisor. And hopefully the new guidelines will help kind of sift through that a little bit more. So I think this idea of moving to suspension is something we need to pull back on because once again, as it says here, could be a great clinician, not a danger to the public. And so we might be losing an amazing clinician just because they're not the best supervisor. And the new regulations for supervision might actually move them out of that framework to begin with.
I agree, John. The new supervision regulations, I think it will maybe weed out some people, or help people understand the how serious it is to be in that position and how critical it is. So if there's no other feedback on this piece, I think we're not opposed to moving it to the maximum penalty column. So,
right.
And also given the other thing I didn't mention here is given, therapist shortages, I know we're thinking of, always keeping that in the back of our minds. So.
Yes. Thank you, Chrissy.
Okay. So we'll, I'll make a note for that to move it.
Perfect.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the engaging in sexual orientation change efforts with a patient under age 18. So I believe we looked at it kind of briefly last time. So I just want to confirm that, and this is on of the disciplinary guidelines document. I know the meeting packet has page numbers, but it's page 31 of the disciplinary guidelines document. I'm not sure what page it's on in the meeting packet. Let's see. Let's see here. So I just want me to read over.
In the PDF, it's page 6, section 11.
Okay. The actual penalty proposed minimum and maximum penalties, it looks like it's on page 48 of item 7 for this meeting, but I'll go ahead and go over them. The minimum penalty would be revocation stayed, 90 to 120 days suspension. So this is one that I mentioned has a higher number. 5 years of probation, standard terms and conditions, supervised practice, education, law and ethics course, cost recovery, reimbursement of probation costs, psych eval, psychotherapy, and restricted practice. And then the maximum penalty would be revocation or denial and cost recovery. So I believe this was modeled after, oh yes, it was modeled after intentionally or recklessly causing physical or emotional harm to a client. So it was modeled after those penalties. I just want to, are we good with that? Are there any changes we'd like to see made?
I just want to make a comment. I think I'm good with that. I just wish, for the sake of record, that the state of California will have the courage to extend this beyond the age of 18, because a lot of harm continues to be done against youth. There are 18, 19, and 20 that are just graduated, for lack of a better word, from foster care system. They are targeted by reparative therapies, conversion therapy that have been proven over and over to be harmful, anti-scientific, and unfortunately, we're not there yet. So I just for the sake of making people aware that this doesn't protect our youth, it does up to the age of 18. I know it's not the scope of the BBS to force that forward, so I'm very aware, but it's just for the educational standpoint of view that it really frightens me, the fact that we haven't been able to go beyond the age of 18 just because of obscure forces that they want to continue to do so to our youth once they turn 18. And I leave it there. So I apologize, but John.
So a question I have about this refers back to our bill from earlier on with Roseanne about the 30-day out-of-state people. I understand when they accept us, they are supposed to work under our rules and regulations, but there are states where SOCIA is absolutely affirmed and accepted and part of regular clinical practice. So is there a way in these regulations to be able to penalize or refer for something to an existing board or to revoke a waiver? In other words, is this something we need to consider because we're looking at this new bill of out-of-state people covering people in the state of California for 30 days?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work. I think we would have to, I'm sure Roseanne's making note of that.
If we were to get Sabina, I believe this is how it would work, that if we were to get a complaint about, if we were to find out, then we would be able to take disciplinary action because we had granted them the permission. And so, in terms of they don't have a license that we could revoke, but we could report it to their licensing board. I believe we could revoke the temporary. Sabina, does that sound correct?
Yes, of course, like any other licensee, if we get a complaint or other types of unprofessional conduct are reported, we would take steps here on the temporary practice allowance, as well as reporting to any of their other licensing regulatory boards.
And I understand that I have a huge bias towards this, but in watching this bill originally get passed, there were a lot of clinicians within the state of California that were not in support of this bill going into effect. Quite a few. I heard them speak quite vehemently against this going into practice. So my concern is that anyone who is choosing to use these types of damaging therapeutic styles with a client under the age of 18 is doing it in a willful manner. It's not for lack of education, it's not for lack of understanding of the law, that there is willful disregard for this philosophical approach to therapy from some clinicians in the state of California. For me, I would put this into an automatic suspension category. I just can't imagine anyone saying, hey, I'm going to do reparative therapy with a teenager just for the fun of it. I think it's going to be more, my belief system says this is this, and this is what I'm going to do. And it's going to be a willful disregard of the state of California laws. And I think that is not protecting the public, that this should be an automatic suspension.
Because this, 90 to 120 days suspension is in that list, I think that's most likely would be the case. You know, obviously they're selecting from a menu of options, but when we do, and Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems, that the judges, when they're, they tend to follow what's in there. And again, there are mitigating circumstances or extenuating circumstances. But I think in general, they tend to follow that menu.
And I believe I misspoke. I mean automatic revocation.
Oh, okay.
I do. And unfortunately, and this is one that I'm willing to go to the front of the class about. I don't think there are mitigating situations when it comes to people doing reparative therapy. I don't believe there are any mitigating issues that could come up in that. It is, once again, it is seen through both medical and psychological associations being a damaging practice. It is the APA has taken a stance, the AMA has taken a stance on it, and I think anyone who practices this need to be aware of that stance and are choosing not to follow through on what is seen as clinical practice and are making a statement. So I do not believe there are mitigating circumstances in this at all, and it is a full automatic revocation.
It's a good point. So you're looking at maybe having it mirror one of the more severe. So I'm looking back at some of our other categories. So the only two right now that have automatic revocation or denial of license are engaging in sexual conduct with a client or former client, and then engaging in an act with a minor punishable as a sexually related crime, regardless of when it occurred. So those are the two that require outright revocation or denial, just FYI. And of course, love to see some discussion on from others.
And we look at sexual abuse and sexual assault as lifelong damaging and traumatic experiences. And it's the same with reparative therapy. It is a lifelong traumatic effect for LGBTQ people. I have clients that I currently work with who are in their 40s and 50s who have been in therapy for years and still are affected by the trauma of having gone through this experience. So this is not just something that, oops, I tried to, convert someone. It actually is deeply psychological, mentally, physically, spiritually damaging to members of the LGBTQ community.
So it looks like Abigail has her hand up.
Oh, thank you, Christy.
Okay.
Abigail.
Oh, yeah, I just want to say my understanding is that it's unethical completely as a therapist to be involved in any work that involves trying to change, right? To even focus on like gender changing practices like overall. So it's just part of the guidelines. That was my understanding since when I first started becoming a therapist. So yeah, I would see how this is deserving of a maximum penalty. I mean, we're giving maximum penalty to improper supervision.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Abigail.
Yeah, and there's data with this particular situation that it is damaging in the long term. So, we talk a lot about data supporting, like this is one of those where it's very clear.
Right. Thank you. I know you heard me a million times on this topic, but I think sometimes there is a misconception. There is just a different kind of approach. In reality, this is totally a stranger from therapeutical, and clinical services. It's not a scientific-based approach. It's not an opinion. It's just really harmful as it could be, a misconduct in relation to sexual harassment and behavior and so forth that we obviously punish. So I think I agree with what has been said so far in terms of making sure that it's clear that there are not different variations of possibility here. The intent is really voluntary and to harm, because there are not, again, a possibility for people to change their sexual orientation or gender identity. So even the attempt to do something like that is extremely harmful. And now we have enough data that shows how the long-term, lifelong effect of this kind of approach that a lot of our people are still paying the price for. So I agree with what John was saying. I don't know what the wording will be, but laying heavy on the aspect of maximum of regulated intervention, I think that will be the way to go here. And I am concerned, again, just to finish, Chris, is that we had this debate 4 years ago. Even some people at the board at the time had some questioning. And there is really, especially now in California, a lot of misguided attempts to let people believe that that's even an option. And so I think we have to send a strong message.
Christy, are we able to make that through this process, just make that an automatic revocation without any law changes?
Good question, Wendy. Thank you. Chris,
you're muted.
You're muted.
Thanks. So yes, so these are law changes because this document is actually incorporated into our regulations. So this has to go through the regulatory process. So we will need to justify each of these changes, and it'll go through a public comment process. And then we'll take any comments we get back to the board for consideration of how we want to respond. So we can, we can make changes that we can justify. So it's, if that's the direction that you would like to go. And then of course, we're going to be talking with our legal counsel and our, staff about, if there's any things that we need to be concerned about with any of this, but.
Okay. I think I would also support moving in that direction. I guess my question was more, do we need to run a bill to make any changes, or can we accomplish this through the regulatory process? And it seems like we could at least start through the regulatory process and then, see how that goes. But I would support moving in that direction for an automatic revocation for this.
Okay, yeah. And so if we do that, then that is, if it's in, it would not need legislation for that. So it's something we can do in our regulations. Changing those penalties is yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I see Abigail.
Yeah, is it possible to also expand the age to like 24?
That is where you would need legislation, and I'm not sure that it's something that it's a bigger thing than the board could, it's well, I can't say that for sure, but I'm not sure. It's something it's kind of something bigger that needs to come from, I think, a different organization as far as sponsoring a bill.
The state of California.
Hopefully there's people working on that. So
yeah, sorry, Christy. Yeah, the state of California, and to answer Abigail, has attempted this several times. Unfortunately, never passed the majority on the Senate or the Assembly, one of the two. But yeah, there was a bill that was actually came also to us at the BBS, which we approved 5 years ago, but unfortunately didn't make the legislation. So yeah, we will need that in order for us to extend the age requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I believe that, Chrissy, that was it for this Am I right? Am I missing anything?
That was it for this one, yeah. Are there stakeholders who would like to comment on this maybe before we move
definitely.
on?
I was going to go out as well. Moderator, if you can please open and see if there are any questions. And
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of the square, type comments, or I would like to make a comment in the text field and make sure it goes to all panelists and hit send. I do have individual identified as Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, this is Kathy Atkins from Camp, and jackhammering just started outside my window, so I apologize if it's loud. I just wanted to clarify the process, the procedure that, because the committee and staff went over a couple different items, and it sounds, just for my own, make sure I'm understanding, it's going to back into public comment through regulation at this point, or it's going to the board. And I apologize, I think my blood sugar is starting to drop here, but so I'm sure you made it clear and I'm just missing it. I just wanted to clarify in case Camp did have comment on anything, sort of how we would go about it. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So right now we're fairly early in the process. So we're wanting feedback along the way. And then it will go through the regulation process where we do a notice to the public. We have a 45-day public comment period. We really prefer to get issues worked out before we go to the making a formal regulation notice. As much as possible, we like to have our language vetted before it gets to that point. So we would love any feedback, and we'll be bringing this back to the next meeting. So anyway, that's kind of how it's going to work. And you're welcome to send us, email, comments, all of that. So.
Thank you, Christy. Moderator, are there any other comments?
Yes, I'm going to send a request to unmute Rebecca Gonzalez microphone.
Almost good afternoon here. Rebecca Gonzalez with NASW California. I just want to say that I support the comments that were made about SOCE and that I like the direction that the discussion went and fully support.
Thank you, Rebecca. Anyone else, moderator?
No additional requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we will bring that back at the next meeting then.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christy, for all your work on this and making sure that translating also to us all the challenges and the conversation around these proposed items. I believe that concludes your item. Am I correct?
Unfortunately not. I know it's long. No. Let's see about how much.
I'm missing the whole. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got probably. We've got.
Yeah, now I see it. Yes, go ahead. Don't worry.
Okay, I'm not going through everything in the memo, but there are certain things. So if we need to take a break in between that, I'm fine with that. So.
I think we're good at the moment, and let's get going, and we might reassess that.
Okay, that sounds good. So the next one is our new penalty guidelines pertaining to records, reporting, and investigations. And these came out of an effort that the Department of Consumer Affairs made and their recommendations. So we want to make sure that the penalties we chose for these are appropriate. So the ones that are being added are failure to provide records to the board within 15 days of request, failure to cooperate and participate in a pending board investigation, failure to report to the board within 30 days of a conviction or disciplinary action taken by another entity, government agency, and then failure to comply with a court order mandating release of records to the board. So for all of these, we made the penalties the same, and we made them mirror the general unprofessional conduct and violations of the chapter or regulations by licensees and registrants as a guide. So we just want to see if there's any feedback on those proposed penalties for those four additions.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy.
Sure. Do you want me to go over what those minimum penalties are?
Yeah, I think it will. Yeah, it will be helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So it would be revocation stayed, 60 to 90 days suspension, 3 to 5 years probation, education, law and ethics course, cost recovery, and reimbursement of costs. So pretty standard. And then of course the maximum penalty is always revocation and denial. So, and again, it's failure to provide records, failure to cooperate in an investigation, failure to report a conviction or disciplinary action, and failure to comply with a court order mandating release of records. And they don't have to all be the same. If this is something that, you know, people want to, you know, provide feedback on, again, and with any of this, if you want to send us feedback after the meeting, that's great too. I know there's a lot here. So, and it's been a lot for us to try to parse and present to you all and figure out how to do that the best way. And I know that it's kind of challenging. But if there is any feedback today, please do speak up.
This is John Sobek, Christy.
Yes.
A curiosity, Steve, you might be able to help with this also. Often we see these particular charges brought up in relation to another existing charge. And so I often feel like we get caught in this little bit of like someone was brought up in a substance use charge, and then because they didn't report it, then that gets added on to the charge as something worse. And then in the process, they maybe don't respond within a 15-day thing, and then it gets even worse. And I just kind of wonder if there's some adjustment that needs to be made in this particular set of guidelines to reflect how it often shows up in our disciplinary actions. Because I think sometimes people get then kind of mired in this. There's always an additional something because I missed this or I did that. I understand sometimes in the middle of these processes, you know, the people are under disciplinary action don't know how to respond in a timely manner, and those pieces of the puzzle. But I just wonder about all that this adds on top of what they're already going through, and if that's something structurally need to address rather than keeping it punitive as an add-on to charges that are usually being considered.
Oh,
that is good. Yeah, Steve, if you have any feedback, or Gina.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The only thing I can think is, yeah, we add on, you know, the charges are there. Once again, though, we'll look at all the different penalties as a, you know, within this and then the other possible penalties they have. I mean, and weigh that out. I see what you're saying. I don't know how to respond to it necessarily, but it's something to look at.
Well, the thought is like when it goes to a judge and they see,
Yeah.
oh, there was some kind of thing that was brought up. Oh, there's this other thing too. Well, then that means I need to add more to this because there's more than one charge on the docket. And very rarely have we ever seen anyone actually brought up on this disciplinary action on its own that I've seen in my history of reading disciplinary actions for the board.
Mm-hmm. You're right, probably. That's I'm sure that's the case. Okay, I see what you're saying. So better, how can we look at this for, you know, the direction instead? Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like, is it, because they often go hand in hand, would the judge be looking at both, you know, sets of penalties? Right. And would it maybe go overboard? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Okay. Gotcha.
And this is once again trying to move away from that punitive model and more into a rehabilitative model. And maybe Gina has some input as well too, just because of the work that they do specifically with our disciplinary action people.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so I don't believe that they add on. For instance, if there's failure to provide records with, say, a DUI, so that would be a conviction of a crime. They don't go, okay, conviction of a crime is X many years probation, and then we flop over to failure to provide records, and it's X years of probation, and we add that together. That isn't how it's done. So they would look at conviction of a crime and what falls under there for minimum and maximum, look at failure to provide records and see what falls under there. If there's something missing from one or the other, and they seem to find that that would be appropriate in the situation, then they could use either or. Again, they can always deviate. These are guidelines, and they often deviate. So it's not really adding on, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So maybe it's a violation. Well, I'm not going to worry about giving an example, but I'm thinking in some cases, it might even be a violation that has less in terms of minimum penalties, but they might bump it up based on what they see in this other category because it's an additional, but it's not like they're just going to add,
Yes, and I think that another reason why they add the additional violation is in the case. So when there's a pleading, not necessarily are all the violations going to be affirmed. So if something happened with, say, the conviction of a crime, let's just say that got dismissed, and all that there was left was failure to provide records. If whatever happened was egregious enough to still place somebody on probation, they would have these minimum penalties as a guideline. And then, of course, they could deviate from that as well. And also, I wanted to point out, we were in a different discussion that we were having. It was the sexual orientation change therapy. I just wanted to add, whenever we have a proposed decision, obviously you guys know this, you do it all the time on the board votes, but if we don't have it as a maximum penalty, and we say we wanted it, the sexual orientation therapy, we wanted revocation only. If we happen to get somebody that decided, an ALJ, decided to use the minimum penalties and you didn't find that to be appropriate, then we can always reject the decision and draft the DAR. So we always have that. The board always has the last vote and the last say. As long as we have it within the guidelines, we can, if revocation is appropriate, then that's what you do.
Righty. So is there any feedback on the penalties that we have provided here, the menu of penalties for these 4 items? Otherwise, we'll just leave it as is for now. Like I said, there will be plenty of opportunity to provide feedback at a future date. All right.
Yes, this is Sabina. You're going to probably be sick of seeing these. You're going to see them so much. Right. This is just the beginning.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one, which is number. Let's see, what page am I on here? 1 second. Okay, so I am on item 7, page 7. Let's see here. And I am looking at the optional term and condition of probation for the clinical diagnostic evaluation. So we had discussed this at the last meeting. So there were some stakeholders had questioned why only psychologists and psychiatrists were permitted to perform clinical diagnostic evaluation. So what we did was we drafted language that would allow any licensed professional whose scope of practice allows them to perform such an evaluation and in accordance with the uniform standards has 3 years of experience conducting evaluations of health professionals with substance use disorders. The other question that had come up at the last meeting was regarding payment for the evaluation and whether it be possible for the board to pay since it can be a barrier. We did talk about this with our legal counsel and we feel that it is critical that it is critical. We don't just feel that, it is critical that the evaluation be neutral. And the concern is that if the board paid for it, it could be perceived as being compromised or biased and that it could be challenged on that basis. So that would be that concern. So just wondering if there's any feedback on any of that, any of those proposed changes or any questions on that.
I'm looking.
It looks good. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Are there any other comments or feedback? I think as Prasi, we're opening to the public so that we can see if there are any.
Let me just cover, actually, I'm going to cover the next one too, because it's kind of related and then we could take public feedback. I know I'm not been really consistent in how we do this, so I apologize. Okay. The next one is the psychological psychiatric evaluation. So this one was also had the same question. And we looked into it for this one. So a psychological evaluation falls under a psychologist's scope of practice, only under a psychologist's scope of practice, and a psychiatric evaluation falls only under a psychiatrist's scope of practice. So you can't, and LCSW cannot do something called a psychological evaluation because those are protected under those scopes of practice. And the same with the psychiatric evaluation. So that is why it's written that way. Then we have the same question about payment for the evaluation. So, and anyway, so we'll go ahead and I'm ready for any feedback.
Thank you now, Christy, thank you. Don't worry, I mean, sometimes flexibility does help how to address this because some things are connected. So it's just for the sake of good conversation, we can address them together at times. Okay, folks, are there any questions or observations? I'm looking around. Perhaps maybe we can now open a moderator, if we can open to the audience and see if there are any comments. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of the square, type comments, or I would like to make a comment in that text field that appears. Make sure it goes to all panelists before you hit the send button. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Back to our board. Should we move forward, Christy?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're ready for that unless there's any further discussion. I didn't see any hands, so.
Right.
So the next term we're looking at is psychotherapy. And at the last meeting, there was a question as to whether an associate would qualify to provide therapy, and also whether this section should specify the type of therapy, meaning individual versus group, the length of sessions, and those types of things. So would love to hear more discussion on that and more about what we think, how to flesh that out in terms of what do we mean when we're saying psychotherapy? What are the more specific aspects of that?
Thank you, Christy. Board. I know we started this conversation some time ago about even the definition and how it's intended to be and how the public has perceived it. So I don't know if there are any additional feedback. Okay.
So
Oh,
I do have a thought. I mean, part of just the ongoing discussion, I believe when we're talking about psychotherapy, we're talking about a clinician under discipline or a registrant under discipline who is dealing with a specific issue. So for me, that leans into more of a one-on-one therapeutic model, where then we can get more complete reports from the therapist who is running that individual sessions versus in a group model where reports tend to often be generalized within the scope and theme of what a group is doing for the evening. So if we are looking for, change in personal growth and supporting a clinician through the disciplinary process, I do lean more towards the individual model. And I also consider that maybe we find a definition that does say, within clinical standards of what a session looks like. Is it a standard 50-minute therapy? Is 30 minutes enough? Kind of look into those models a little bit as we're shaping this up. Those are just a couple of thoughts I had on it.
thank you.
Oh, and I do support the idea that associates are qualified to do this as well.
Thank you. Chrissy, would you be okay if I move it out? I mean, if I go to the public with this?
Yeah.
Or you would like to add more?
No, I'd be happy to, ready to move to the public for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Chrissy. Moderator, thank you.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. Click on the question mark, type comment in the text field, and send it to all panelists if you would like to participate. I see no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. Okay, Christy, back to you.
Right. So do we have, so do you want staff to just discuss this internally then? And we can bring it back. I think that's probably where we're heading with this one then.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like, I don't want to interpret everything that's been said or not said in this regard, but it looks like, as you know, we have full trust to continue the analysis and also to see exactly, what can be brought back to us and the board. I believe that's to be the best way to go, Christy.
Okay. All right.
Unless there are any other objections to that, I think we could move forward.
Alrighty, that sounds good. The next one I want to talk about is the relapse prevention plan. So this amendment had originally been proposed as a new optional term of probation that would require, if the board chose, the probationer to complete a relapse prevention plan. So this would be for those who don't meet the criteria for a rehabilitation program. They would instead be attending a recovery support program such as AA or another type. And an integral component of recovery support is relapse prevention planning. So we had talked about, is this really necessary? Or is it a given? Or is it appropriate that this person will be submitted to the board? Or is this beneficial to the extent that it should be included? And we'll need to quantify, if we keep this one, what the respondent's current status in recovery or rehabilitation means, because that's talked about in the language. And so we did talk about this in July, and there were some additional issues brought forward. And so looking for some direction here. So these were questions that were brought forward was, should a relapse prevention plan be required only if the respondent's therapist recommends it? Is such a plan enforceable? How would the board ensure the plan is effective? Should criteria or a template be developed by the board? And is 15 days too short of a time frame for submission, that concern that may not allow for a thoughtful plan or ability to discuss with the therapist? So I kind of I feel like at the last meeting, there was some interest in keeping this one. But the discussion was kind of like, okay, well, then if we keep it, what does it look like? And then we can kind of decide from there.
Right.
So just a little guidance on maybe how we want to move forward here and some thoughts on that. The other thing that makes this a little bit complicated is I know we're looking at, this would be for people who don't meet the criteria for a rehabilitation program. The rehabilitation program is something we're also looking at pretty deeply. So I'm not sure where that one's going to go or how that plays into this. But again, this relapse prevention plan is brand new. It wasn't in there previously. And so we wanted to add it, because I think sometimes Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, that is sometimes added in, even though it's not right now in our document. Like, is it sometimes?
That's the dependency support or support group that you're talking about. But I think this came to be a topic because the rehabilitation that we talked about it. John had some input on it, that we had talked about it, that it is something that we cannot determine if somebody qualifies. So somebody has to qualify under certain criteria to meet the diagnosis for meeting a for getting into a real rehabilitation program. John had stated before too that that we don't, maybe they're not as hopeful as we might think they are. So we were looking at eliminating that, and I don't know if we're able to do that with because it's part of the uniform standard. So I'm not sure if we can just remove that. But we were talking about the relapse prevention to use in situations where we would feel that it was appropriate when we have multiple DUIs, this year, 2 years later, there's some sort of relapse going on, and we would use this instead. There's another board that has some sort of similar program, and I don't know, what kind of, how their legal process approved it or whatnot. So I don't really know. But we were thinking this would be more helpful for somebody to write down their support group and their, et cetera, whatever they do to prevent relapse, what their state their triggers or whatnot. But we also don't know if this is already being covered in another area of the terms, in maybe with their therapy, with their dependency support group. So it's just out there for a topic to discuss, I guess.
Right. Thank you, Gina. That's very helpful.
And just for some potential input on this, it's the Board of Registered Nursing that has a relapse prevention plan document. It might be intriguing to see how that's been working for them, if that's a model to potentially look at working with.
We did look at they actually have a relapse prevention plan that they wrote up that somebody has to fill out. So I do have a copy of that, but I had a little bit of concern that it might need to be more individualized to the person, as opposed to us just, providing a form they fill out, or, but then again, you want to make sure it's thorough and it meets a certain standard. So.
Well, and I think also for me, part of this is that then when maybe we're at a probation meeting, that we can look at that and say, what are you doing to maintain sobriety? What are you doing? That we actually have this as part of our documentation and those types of files. Because often we run across cases like this was mentioned in your original discipline, you've chosen not to do it. We're curious about that. So this, type of relapse prevention plan might just be another piece of that conversation.
Very true. I'm looking around, any other I know. Any other comments, suggestions from the board? Doesn't seems like. Christy, would you like to add more, or I can open to the public as well?
Go ahead and open to the public, but I think maybe what I'll do is take John's suggestion and we'll talk to BRN and see how it's been working for them. And I think that may answer some of these questions that are in my memo, and then I can bring that back and we can make some, some decisions.
Makes sense, yes. Okay, moderator, can you please open?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is open. Instructions are on the screen. If you'd like to participate, click on that question mark inside of the square, type comment, and click send to all panelists.
Thank you.
No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. Chrissy, at this point, I think your suggestion is the way to go, so that we can continue to elaborate on this, so we can move forward.
Yeah, and I think that was actually the last thing that I really wanted to discuss. So yay!
Wonderful, finally, we got there.
Right?
Thank you so much for your diligence again. This has been really helpful, and I know some of these conversations sometimes, takes a long time to develop into action, but that's part of the process, right? So that we make sure that we don't leave anything out, that our stakeholders are fully informed and involved in the decision making process. So thank you so much.
Well, I want to join Max in that. I am just so amazed at the work you're doing with this and the level of detail you're going in with it. It's just stunning to me. So if I had a hat, I'd take it off to you right now. This is just stunning to me to see where we're moving with this. And thank you for all the work you're doing on it.
Thank you so much. And it's truly a team effort. So I appreciate everybody who's contributing.
Max and Christy, is it too late to mention something from page 8 that just came to me?
Yeah, no problem.
No, it's never too late, Abigail. I mean, we're still on the agenda item, so we're moving soon in the next one, but go ahead. Don't worry.
Just in thinking about giving more opportunities and options for people, right, to complete the disciplinary actions and get back, right, to work, or if they're already working, right, for them to be cleared. We have on optional term and condition of probation, psychological, psychiatric evaluation. I was wondering if we can add like a psychosocial evaluation and include, right, more mental health professionals that can provide these evaluations.
Interesting idea. I see where you're, because that would expand. I can look at that and see how those might differ in terms of what's being looked at. How might those be different?
Yeah, because I know in the world of evaluations for immigration, they've expanded that so that more people have access to therapists that can provide diagnoses. And so, yeah, I think that would be beneficial. That's all.
No, that's very good. Thank you, Abigail. I'm glad that
you today.
I'm glad that you took the time to do that. Thanks for sharing. That's actually really, really important. On that comment, are there any other inputs that perhaps that might have awakened? Okay. That will conclude our amazing report for agenda item number 7. Thank you again, Christy. And we're moving now to agenda item number 8, which is an update on board sponsored and monitored legislations. And I believe I don't have a note here, but this is back to Roseanne, or is I still with you, Christy? Back to Roseanne.
Back to Roseanne.
Back to Roseanne, yes, that's
Back to
correct.
Roseanne. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. So I'm happy to report that the board's two sponsored bills this year both were passed and signed by the governor. So AB 1758, we've already discussed that, but it was signed by the governor and became effective on August 29th, 2022. So that is now in effect. That allows supervision via video conferencing in all settings. Our other bill, AB 1759, was also signed by the governor, and that becomes effective January 1st. And so that bill does a couple of different things. It requires applicants for licensure and current licensees to complete 3 hours of training and coursework in the provision of mental health services via telehealth. It also requires, upcoming as of January 1st, all registrants to complete 3 hours of continuing education in California law and ethics each renewal cycle. So we're working on implementation of that right now. We have an FAQ up on our website, and we're working to kind of get the word out on our social media about AB 1759, and especially that upcoming requirement for registrants, because that is a pretty big change. So that is what we're working on this fall in terms of implementation. Also, our omnibus bill, SB 1495, which just made some minor technical changes, was also signed. There was one set of amendments that the board had asked be included in the omnibus bill that was rejected by the Senate Health Committee. So that I've included information about that in the packet and an attachment A for that particular item. There were several bills that also went to the governor that the board had taken positions on. AB 988, which is the 988 mental health crisis hotline and how to set that up and fund it. That was signed by the governor. SB 923 regarding gender affirming care was signed by the governor. SB 966, which was Camp's bill about medical reimbursement for covered mental health services provided by an associate social worker or MFT who is in a federally qualified health center or rural health clinic. That was signed by the governor. There were several bills that the board had taken positions in that were vetoed by the governor this year, a little bit more than usual. And so that included some of the loan repayment grant programs and SB 964, which is about data collection for the behavioral health workforce. So I included in the memo, the governor, whenever he vetoes a bill, provides a veto message. So in the memo, if you're interested in the reasoning which the governor gave for vetoing, there is some information there. A lot of it had to do with funding for mental health and whether there was funding in the budget for the bill or not. So that's the legislative update. I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any questions or comments about any of the bills that Roseanne mentioned? I'm looking around. If there are any. Okay, looks Abigail. Thank you.
That's an old hand. Sorry.
That's an old hand. It's fine. Always glad to see you, so it's good. Let me see. I think let me go and open to the public, Roseanne, if it's okay with you, to see if there are any questions. Moderator, if you can please do that. Thank you.
Yes, the Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click on that question mark inside of the square, type comment, and send it to all panelists. I have individual Ashana. I will send a request to unmute your microphone.
My name's Ashna. I've just had a question regarding the supervision via video conferencing. I just wanted to know if there was a specific form that would need to be filled out for that, or we just keep using the same form.
You mean a form by the supervisor needs to fill out for the assessment that it's appropriate?
Yes.
No, there's no specified form. The supervisors will just document their assessment in their notes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Roseanne. Are there any other comments from moderator, from the public?
No, would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Roseanne, how would you like to proceed? Would you like to move forward to the next one, or?
Yeah, the next one is the rulemaking proposal update, and that's going to be Christy.
Right. Christy, hi, introducing our agenda item number 9.
Yes, so covering our current regulation proposals. The first one is our continuing education and additional training requirements that was approved finally by the Office of Administrative Law, and it takes effect July 1st of next year. We are working on Q&As and updating the website and all of that, so you'll be seeing that coming out in the coming weeks for all of those changes. And then we have a reg package that's just making some minor changes in regards to examination waiting periods, professional corporations, accrediting agencies, and equivalent degrees. So that was just noticed to the public on September 16th, and that public comment period ends November 1st. So we so far haven't gotten any, so we'll see if we do get any. Again, these are minor and have not been controversial thus far. So and then the last one is the ones that we were just talking about, the enforcement process, the disciplinary guidelines and such. So that will be a process. And that's really it for the moment.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you so much for the updates. And are there any questions about the latest updates? John?
So, Steve, just a question for you. Were you with us? Yes, there you are. Is that since we're including that board occupational analysis for CE credits, and this is coming into place in July of 2023, is that already an action item on your office's work?
Yeah. I mean, it's anytime those regulations it's you mean, are we going to gear up for that and make sure it's in place? Is that what you're asking?
Well, creating an occupational analysis is a pretty long process. So I just didn't know if with this rule now in place, if you have already begun the process and where we are in that.
Well, this involves with our exam developers, OPES, and we do occupational analysis for each of the different exams that we actually administer. And so they're on a cyclical basis. So right now, I think I don't know when the next one is, but when that comes up, we'll work with them to make sure that the people get the CE credits. So we don't actually do the occupational analysis ourselves. It's in conjunction with OPES, but they kind of conduct that. And it's usually every exam, we go through this process every about 5 years. So, and I think the last one we just did was for LEPs. And I believe we probably have the license and the law and ethics exams, I think might be the next ones we're going to be looking at. So.
Well, I think just if on July 1st, 2023, we're going to be offering this as a CEU option of 6 credits, which is actually a large number of credits. So we may need to make sure that we are prepared to offer that on July 1st. That's what I'm asking us to make sure we're looking at.
Oh yeah, I mean for this, it's we're ready to offer it. I mean it's the process of offering that is they will get a certificate from OPS. We'll monitor who actually participates. So it's really easy to implement. What the big thing for this is to use it to actually attract people to actually take the survey and the occupational analysis. So I think for when I'm looking at this, most of our work on this process is going to be on that July 1st, the next occupational analysis is we're ready really to get that word out that you can have these credits if you participate, and this is the value of participating, and that's what we're looking at for that. So yeah, but we will be ready. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Steve, as well. I believe that will conclude I think I need to go out first to see if there are any comments on the last agenda item. Moderator, can you please open to the public? Thank you.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click on that question mark inside of the square, type comment, and send it to all panelists. I do have individual identified as Ben Cadwell. I will send a request to unmute your microphone in just a moment.
Good afternoon, Ben Caldwell, MFT. And this is just a follow-up, Steve, on what you were talking about with the exam process. Is it fair to say then that based on where we are in the occupational analysis surveys and in that cycle, that there will not be changes to the law and ethics exam plans for any of the BBS professions in 2023? That those changes would take effect 2024 or later?
I would think so, because I have to look, and I got your email, so thanks. I was like, I have to look at the cycle, but yeah, since we haven't done the occupational analysis yet, I mean, I have to see when that is scheduled for, but it would take probably, I think, yeah, a couple months or a year after to come into play. So, but I'll definitely, trying to think if we have those out there. We don't have a list of them, but yeah, it would probably be 2024, I would think.
Okay, great.
I'll clarify that with you, though.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Moderator, are there any other questions, observations?
No additional requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. Okay, back to the board. That concludes our agenda item 9, which was update on board rulemaking proposals. And we are about to conclude the meeting. First of all, agenda item number 10. This is the time where there are suggestions for future agenda items. We start from the board. This is for the P&A committee, not for the general board. If there are any suggestion from my fellow board members. Looking around. I don't believe there are any. Moderator, can we open to the public? Thank you.
The moderator, the Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, follow the instructions on the screen. Click on the question mark, type comment, and send it to all panelists.
Thank you.
No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A? Oh, actually, I have one request that was just submitted. Riva Orr, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name there. I'm going to submit a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, moderator.
If it hasn't been brought up before, I think the 6-year window should be brought up as something to discuss. Because I think that the 6-year window, the 6-year regulation is very, punitive and discriminatory towards people who are chronically ill or disabled or neurodivergent at that.
Thank you for your suggestion. Moderator, are there any others?
No additional. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes our agenda item number 10, and we're moving to our last agenda items, 11. This is the time where we have public comments for items that are not in the agenda. To the members of the public, please stay within your allocated minutes, so we can accommodate more comments in case there are. And so we'll start from the board if there are any general comments for items that are not in the agenda. Okay, looks like we're clear. And we are moving now to our audience. Moderator, if you can please open again. Thank you so much.
Yes, the Q&A is open. Instructions on the screen. Click on the question mark, type comment in the text field, and send it to all panelists.
Thank you. Okay.
I have individual identified as Riva Orr. I will send a request to unmute your microphone. And Chair, what was the time frame? Was that a minute or 2 minutes?
If it's the only comment, we can extend to 2 minutes.
To unmute.
Hi, thank you. So I guess just kind of back to what I was talking about. So I'm curious to know if that issue has been raised ever, and if there were any decisions made on it or any any talk about it at all?
So we usually, just for the sake of the agenda, comments on for items not on the agenda, usually we don't engage on those, but just for the sake of the question, yes, that's been addressed before. It's been a conversation the board has addressed, and it hasn't been concluded yet. There's been a lot of inputs from our stakeholders. So thank you for following us today, because definitely be part of this committees, PNA or others, licensing committee as well, but also our general board meetings are opportunity for you to share your input, your consideration, your concerns about this particular or others agenda items. So yes, has been addressed, just to answer your question, in past board meetings and PNA as well. So thank you. Moderator, do we have any other public comments for items not in the agenda?
No additional. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. Okay, back to the board, just in case there are any last minute comments. I don't see any. That will certainly conclude our PNA committees today. I would like to thank Roseanne and Christy really for guiding us through today, for the hard work in preparation of today. Thank you so much to all the staff, but to our moderators as well, because it takes a lot of time to follow everything that we are doing, and definitely our stakeholders, our members, and our audience. Thank you so much for your time and participation. For those of you that don't know, we are reconvening as the Board of Behavioral Sciences has a general board meeting coming up Thursday, November 2nd, 3rd and 4th, actually, sorry. November 3rd and 4th is when we are reconvening for our Board of Behavioral Sciences in Sacramento, but we will have, for our audience, the opportunity to connect via WebEx once again. So thank you all for your work. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.